It was about 8:30 a.m. when I officially set foot back on the mountain after 10 years. The mountain itself stood on national park grounds, so a path was carved out along the mountain so people don't get lost and stumble across an unstable area. It was late autumn, and the air swirled with a brisk aura. It was nothing like the bitter cold I felt that night. As a matter of fact, the cold air on my face felt refreshing. I could hear the slight frozen dirt crunch beneath the tread of my heavy boots as I hiked along the path. The trees still had leaves on them, but they were clearly preparing for the harshness of winter. The trail I walked upon was a steep incline, but it was a picturesque trail dotted with unique trees, miniature natural waterfalls, and other natural wonders. I hiked for about an hour and a half, but I couldn't tell exactly. I seemed to have lost my sense of time up on the mountain. I knew it was still early morning, but I wasn't sure how much time had passed since my arrival. The further I went, the colder it became. My mind began to race with paranoia and suspicion, but I was able to suppress the creeping feeling of dread I felt. I never fully sunk in what I was doing. I still believed with all my heart that the creature that killed my friends was still roaming these mountains. So what the heck was I doing?
I'm here to confront the past.
I spoke out loud, as though I was arguing with my inner self. After about 20 more minutes of hiking, I could make out a clearing in the distance. I couldn't see for sure, but it looked to be a circular clearing. Probably carved out by park rangers for the campers to set up. As I closed in on the clearing, my boot got lodged underneath a root that was sticking up on the ground, and I plummeted onto my face, cursing in a mix of pain and confusion. The first thing I smelled was the metal scent of blood coming from my face. The next immediate thing I noticed was the smell of burning firewood. I sat up confusedly. In the clearing, which was previously empty, a campsite was set up. There were 3 tents, one red, one blue, and one gray. They were all set up in circular position around a campfire which had since smoldered out. I stood, desperately trying to keep my pulsing heart containing in my ribcage. I knew for a fact that the campsite hadn't been there a minute ago. I knew. Slowly, I approached the campsite. I recognized the 3 tents. But I kept pushing the notion out of my mind. This can't be happening. It just can't be. I could smell the smoke from the firewood, and I could feel the stinging sensation in my arm, which I had scraped in my fall. This was happening. The sensations were too real to ignore or pass off as a lucid daydream. Without thinking, I unzipped the red tent. Empty. I slowly moved to the blue tent. Empty. Cautiously, I've turned around to face the gray tent, which was now unzipped. I crouched inside to see sleeping bags splayed out within the tent. Something was in it. I moved further into the tent, placing a shaky hand on the surface of the sleeping bag. Whatever it was in there, it was ice cold. I could feel condensation building on my palm, even through the cloth of the sleeping bag. Suddenly, whatever was in it sprang to life. The bag jolted alive, twisting and turning in a feverish rage. Overcome with shock, I fell backwards out of the tent flaps, my body splayed across the cold dirt. The smoke had died from the campsite. All around me was cold. Standing up while simultaneously backing away, my eyes locked onto the gray tent. I expected some hulking monstrosity to come shambling out of it, but nothing emerged. Slowly, I backed myself up against a nearby tree, keeping my eyes on the gray tent. Slowly, I removed the pocket knife from my back pocket, raising it towards the tent. Something was in there, and it had to come out sooner or later. I stayed on the mountains for 8 hours before a ranger found me. I was pointing my knife at an empty clearing of land, screaming and crying, telling something to keep its distance. The ranger was doing his rounds when he found me. He told me his job was to patrol the trails that were closed off to the public. That's how he found me.
I'll be damned how you got up there, son.
He said concernedly as he lit a cigar.
Nobody's been up here for 10 years.
So there it was. I don't expect anybody here to believe my story, but I swear to God, the things I saw were real. I felt something in that sleeping bag. I saw it spring to life with malicious intent, with sinister intent. Something is up there in those mountains, in the town where I live. Parents tell their children a rhyme to encourage them to stay away from the mountains. They tell stories of a thing called the Mountaineer that kills anybody who trespasses on its lands. I don't know why it hasn't killed me yet, but I dread the true answer. And every night, when it gets even just a little bit colder, I clench my pocket knife tighter from underneath my pillow.